It's no secret that I'm a big fan of Splinter Cell. In fact, chances are good that if you're watching this video right now, my love for Sam Fisher and Friends is the main defining thing you know about me. I mean, just look at my profile picture drawn by Matt Kenny, at MattKennyArt, mattkenny.com. It's a series I played each entry of at release, have replayed all of them through multiple times, some dozens, and it's really because of this great franchise that I have any kind of audience at all. Splinter Cell is not only a series I have a big appreciation for as a fan, but it's one I can't help but feel like I owe in some way, given the jumpstart it provided to my current modest success as a YouTuber. I lay all of that out in advance, so you understand the weight of what I'm about to say. I don't want there to be a new Splinter Cell. I mean, I do. I'd like nothing more, in fact, but what I really mean is that I don't want a new Splinter Cell made by modern-day Ubisoft, because I do not trust modern-day Ubisoft to do it justice. There was a time when I would have called Ubisoft my favorite game developer/publisher. They were really consistent at putting out quality games across various genres. Rainbow Six, Ghost Recon, Splinter Cell, Brothers in Arms, Assassin's Creed, Far Cry, Prince of Persia, Rayman, and others I'm certainly forgetting because I didn't play them. Each had their own identity that made them stand out from one another, and when you saw that spiral logo on a box as you browsed your local game store, you were almost guaranteed to get something worthwhile that you'd remember for years. But this changed, and Ubisoft would begin stuffing almost all of their major franchises into the same cookie-cutter template. Excessively huge open-world games with maps covered in content vomit where you couldn't go 10 feet without stumbling into some repetitive side mission or one of 1,000 different collectibles. This pretty much started with the success of Assassin's Creed, a franchise I used to enjoy when it stood out from the rest of the publisher's catalog that I've now become entirely indifferent to. Hell, it was a running joke among players for years that every single Ubi title had you climbing a shit ton of towers, and it was funny because it was completely true. Even The Crew, a driving game, figured out a way to include towers. It became silly to the point of parody, so much so that Ubisoft open world game pretty much became its own genre. But that's not even when the true problem started. Sure, every title these guys put out blended together, making each experience less and less memorable while the formula became more and more stale, but at least their games were still well made and provided tons of value. Some chunks of that perceived value were made up of shallow content, and I would much prefer smaller, tightly designed games over these bloated ones, but most of the chaff could be easily ignored if you just wanted to plow through the main stuff, which alone was enough to justify a purchase. The real issues began when Ubisoft, and pretty much every other major publisher, started to prioritize the live service business model. After all, why make a product people play and enjoy for a few days, weeks, or months when you can make one that people play forever? Or at least until the next franchise installment. Supporting a game long-term sounds great on paper, but in most cases this means small drip feeds of unremarkable content that add very little and are just there to pull players back at regular intervals cause, hey, new stuff! Most of these games were also built to be always online, or at least heavily encouraged playing with a group of friends over the internet so everyone could show off their sick cosmetics. On that note, I must of course mention everyone's favorite gaming subject, monetization. With products designed around extensive roadmaps that encourage players to keep coming back, that also means more opportunities for players to spend, and by golly gee whiz are they given plenty of crap to waste money on. Before a game is even out, Ubisoft is already begging for more cash, offering multiple editions of the same product, all of which contain different bonuses where even the ludicrous $200 super mega ultra iconic bundle does not come with everything. This infamous chart for the different versions of Watch Dogs is a glowing example of pre-order culture at its absolute worst. Let's not forget all the season passes expecting you to pay for undefined expansions, plus any additional DLC they make down the road. The sticker price for a game might be $60, but rest assured that if you want the complete package, you can expect to pay 3 to 4 times that. Now, to their credit, Ubisoft has generally moved away from offering an upfront season pass, instead making post-launch content free, at least for the first year of a game's lifecycle. But the reason they're doing that is because of how much profit they're already making from repeat microtransactions. While publishers like EA and Activision will be ripped to shreds when gamers catch wind of their crappy business practices, and rightfully so, Ubisoft is often forgotten about, or at least spared the worst of the backlash. At first, their attempts at adding microtransactions were relatively small, some skins here, an optional booster there, but they tended to fly under the radar for most people, and I suspect that was because the games they were making were still generally seen as good enough to forgive the transgression. But like any major publisher, the more they got away with, the more they thought they could get away with, eventually reaching a point where their products were undeniably compromised to encourage player spending. Assassin's Creed Odyssey slowing down XP earned in order to tempt you into buying not 1, but 2 XP time savers to speed up the grind. For Honor, with PvP modes built around having superior gear that you could just buy. Ghost Recon Breakpoint, which monetized every single solitary aspect of the game down to weapons, gear, skins, upgrades, attachments, skill points, literally fucking everything. Current-day Ubisoft products seem to be designed around being storefronts that maximize profit first, with the integrity of the game experience a distant second priority. That doesn't mean Ubisoft isn't capable of making fun games. I enjoyed The Division 2 enough to give it a spot on my top 10 list for last year. But not even that game is safe from the live service trappings, and while its money-making schemes aren't anywhere near as intrusive as other titles I just mentioned, they're an ever-present wart that can't help but feel gross and unnecessary. Having games built this way makes it damn near impossible for me to get invested in them, especially long-term. Ironically, everything that's supposed to keep me coming back ends up turning me away. The prime example of this is Rainbow Six Siege. I played Siege at launch and quite liked it. I wasn't amazing at it, and I would have appreciated some kind of campaign, but it provided intense multiplayer with cool, destructible environments, giving the game a unique feel. I see how massively popular it's become, and every once in a while I'll get this urge to boot it back up. But every time I do, I'm bombarded by one of the most absurdly monetized games I've ever seen. Copious amounts of weapon skins, charms, uniforms, headgears, bundles, operators, all with seemingly random prices. A new playable character costs as much as a charm, which costs as much as a gun camo? Are these values determined by the Price is Right wheel? No, you don't have to purchase a lot of this stuff with real money, you can earn them through play over time, but the amount of renown, the in-game currency needed for these things, is so inflated that without spending, we're talking 10 or more hours of gameplay for just one of these items, and that's if you don't unlock anything else along the way. Man, if only there was a way to increase how much renown I could earn each match. Oh look, boosters! Around now, some of you are probably tiring of my tangents and are wondering what any of this has to do with a new Splinter Cell. I wanted to go over all the gross business practices Ubisoft has been guilty of first, so you can see why I'm not exactly comfortable with them revisiting one of my favorite franchises. But in all honesty, I think it's because of all this crap that we haven't seen Sam Fisher return. Think about some of the franchises I brought up. Assassin's Creed, open world live service with tons of potential busy work to grind through. Ghost Recon, open world live service that encourages co-op with tons of potential busy work to grind through. Rainbow Six, multiplayer only live service with an ever-expanding torrent of extras to grind for. All of these franchises are easy to rework and plug into the now standard Ubisoft model. Splinter Cell, however, doesn't comfortably fit into any part of it, and I genuinely believe that's the reason we haven't seen a new installment since 2013, because it sure as hell isn't for lack of demand. Open world? Well, as a traditionally single-player series focused on sneaking around baddies at a methodical pace, dropping our goggled hero on a massive continent wouldn't really work. I can at least kind of buy a squad of heavily equipped soldiers exploring around, fighting bullet sponge bosses, and doing big-ass jumps while blasting Darude Sandstorm, but an elite stealth operative in that environment feels out of place. I can already hear the comments bringing up Metal Gear Solid 5, so let me counter those now. While the Phantom Pain is well built mechanically, giving the player tons of options, it also lacks much of a soul. It was fun to play in the moment, I know I put 50 hours into it, but there isn't anything about that game that has stuck with me long term, as every guard outpost, enemy base, and stretch of road blend together. All it does is exemplify the often superior design of true structured levels, like the older Splinter Cells, which have environments I can map out from memory alone. So what about the live service model? Without the loads of busy work that comes with a 10 square mile landmass, what kind of consistent content drops could you add to a Splinter Cell? Challenges maybe, but that's not real substance. The only thing that would be worth adding to the single player is additional levels, but that would require real time and effort. You can't just pump out new ones on a regular basis. Well, you can, but they'd almost certainly be bite-sized pieces of crap and not worth playing. The obvious solution, then, is supporting Spies vs. Mercs multiplayer long-term, but again, what exactly could you add? Good maps still take time, especially ones that have to be designed around two entirely different styles of play. You might think cosmetic options like new outfits for both sides is the easy answer, but with gameplay that revolves around blending into the shadows, your options would have to be very limited. Can't exactly have a spy wearing bright pink sneaky pants and light-up silent boots running around. There simply isn't room for hundreds of colorful knickknacks in this context, and spending most of your time in the dark means no one would be able to see the stuff anyway. As for monetization, the aforementioned issue with adding cosmetics to the multiplayer of a stealth title obviously limits the number of things players could waste money on. I suppose the other option is to then lock equipment for each team behind a high level requirement, like spies don't get smoke bombs until level 35, and mercs don't get motion trackers until level 40. Then stifle the amount of XP you earn per match to make the leveling process nice and slow while selling shortcuts to players without the patience to grind. And all it would cost Ubisoft is their integrity and the respect of their fanbase. But you can't just monetize multiplayer, surely we can find a way to squeeze some money out of the campaign lovers too, right? Think about it, if Blacklist came out today, this is almost certainly what it would look like. Let's take the cash earned after each mission and knock off a few digits. Okay, now let's take those equipment prices and maybe add a number onto each one. Alright. Oh, and let's put an arbitrary amount of premium currency next to everything we'll call, echelon coins, yeah, and sell them in inconvenient predetermined packs so you're always forced to buy more than you need. Alienating players for profit is so fun! Let me stop for a second and say, if anyone at Ubisoft is watching, don't do these things. These are all terrible ideas regardless of the game or series. I'm just making a point about how a company desperate to satiate their greed would find some method to force monetization in regardless of the consequences. Do you see the problem? Without a surefire way to milk Splinter Cell fanatics for every cent they're worth without blatantly compromising progression in clear and scummy ways, why bother making a new entry when you have so many other franchises that easily lend themselves to DLC, cosmetics, long-term grinds, and microtransactions? You wouldn't. Why bother making another masterpiece like Chaos Theory that doesn't have thousands of unlockables where the basic act of playing it was its own reward when you can make live service open world game number 475? This is almost certainly the reason why we haven't seen major additions to other once notable franchises like Prince of Persia or Rayman either. They don't fit the model. It's because of this shallow, profit-focused mindset of current-day Ubisoft that I'd rather let a franchise like Splinter Cell lie with dignity than get transformed into a bastardized version of its former self. As much as I hate to say that, I don't want to see a new installment come out in the next few years that releases with 7 different editions, has hundreds of brightly colored polka-dotted spies sprinting around some fictional country, confuses an abundance of monotonous tasks with value, and has a multi-page storefront where the experience is sold off in pieces a few dollars at a time. Who knows if we'll ever get to that point anyway. Ubisoft CEO Yves Guillemot said in an interview that Sam Fisher's return to video games would offer, quote, some new type of experiences, but more on different devices. To me, that says mobile or VR. I personally don't give a flying tri-rotor about phone games, and suspect the platform shift would guarantee a buttload of microtransactions, and while I've recently learned about the magic of virtual reality firsthand, I don't see Splinter Cell translating great to the platform. I'm not exactly jumping for joy at the idea of the series' next entry being some gimmick and not a full-fledged installment, but at least if the franchise sneaks its way onto your smart device, I can easily dismiss it as not part of the mainline series. I'd be sad, sure, but this franchise's absence has already made me dead inside by this point anyway. It's also worth pointing out that after the disaster that was Breakpoint, Ubisoft acknowledged some of their shortcomings and promised to implement significant changes to its production process. That may sound promising on its surface, but with the word of major corporations being about as reliable as my upload schedule, I'll wait with maximum skepticism to see what their future products look like first before I give them any credit. I've made this whole rant about Ubisoft, but rest assured that by changing some words around, you could easily apply everything I've said to pretty much every other major publisher, because I don't trust them either. I wouldn't trust modern-day EA to bring back Burnout. I wouldn't trust modern-day Activision to make a proper Tony Hawk sequel. And I wouldn't trust modern-day Bethesda with, well, pretty much fucking anything. But my well-documented love for Splinter Cell, and how many times year after year I've had my hopes and dreams for a new entry crushed, made Ubisoft the easiest, most relatable target to direct my sour grapes toward. In my heart of hearts, I want few things more than the next chapter in a series I hold dear, but after so much time to reflect and observe how they've handled their other titles, I just don't trust Ubisoft to do it right. Hey, thanks for taking the time to listen to a Broken Man ramble. Really appreciate it. If you did enjoy the video, please be sure to leave a rating down below in the comments. Let me know what you think of Ubisoft, how they've been handling their titles in recent years, or the game industry as a whole. And please consider subscribing to the channel if you'd like to hear more from me in the future.